Welcome to the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Bookshelf, a space for women healing from betrayal to reconnect with their mind, body, and soul, one page at a time. I'm Rachel Strong Smith, a betrayal trauma coach who's walked this path myself. In each episode, we'll explore books that speak to the heart of recovery, books that validate your experience, offer insight, and remind you that you're not alone. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about coming home to yourself. So, whether you're in the thick of survival or finding your way back to solid ground, pull up a chair. You're in the right place. Hi, welcome back. We are talking about a new book today. What Can I Do About Me by Rhyll Croshaw. And the him is crossed out and then it says me. I really like this book. This was another book that was early in my recovery, one that I read early on. Rhyll Croshaw talks about her journey and what happened and how she found out about her husband's sexual betrayal. It is a very powerful story. I really suggest you read it. It's right at the beginning. And her bravely sharing her story has offered support and help for a lot of women around the world. Rhyll Croshaw is the founder of SAL 12 Step, and it offers support for women experiencing betrayal trauma. And it is a really neat resource. So one thing that Rhyll talks about is that she thought that if her husband recovered, all of her problems would go away. So she kept waiting for that day to come, and it didn't. And it finally occurred to her she needed her own healing. I really resonate with that. For years, about 20 years, I really thought that if I could just manage my husband's addiction, help him through this, give enough filters, or be his accountability partner, that he would be recovered and then I would be okay. Because I figured the problems were his sexual addiction. We solve that, then I'm okay. But actually, all of the trauma associated with living with somebody who has a sexual addiction is very significant, and it does not go away just because they get into recovery. It also isn't about them getting into recovery so that you're okay. Whether or not they get into recovery, that is what helps the relationship to grow and heal. But your own healing isn't dependent on his work. Rhyll says, "My husband's recovery is not mine. I will not fully heal without my own personal recovery." That's actually a really big statement. It's pretty confusing. Sometimes it feels selfish because we've been conditioned that to work on our own healing, that maybe that's selfish. But it actually is the key for your own healing. The relationship itself, there's two people in that, but your healing, it's not dependent on another person. Rhyll talks about shame. She talks about sitting in church and wondering, what are people thinking about me? And wondering, well, everybody else seems happy. Nobody else seems to be dealing with this. Am I the only one? That shame really keeps us in isolation. I know for me, I felt so alone. I felt like I was the only one going through this. A couple of people I did talk to about it, they hadn't had any experience with it. I also had the belief that, well, this is a problem between me and my husband, and I'm not supposed to share that, and isn't that a violation of privacy? It really kept me isolated, which was the point. And I was so scared to talk about sexual betrayal, sexual addiction. There's a lot of shame associated with that, and it left me very isolated. Another part of it is not even knowing it's an addiction. A lot of women are experiencing this in their homes, but they don't know it's an addiction. And Rhyll offers a definition for sexual addiction. One is it's compulsive. Two, it's continuing despite negative consequences. A preoccupation, so an obsessive thinking, and a tolerance. I absolutely did not label my husband's sexual addiction as an addiction in the beginning because he didn't. He just said, "Oh, I've got a little problem with pornography." It never ended, even though he said it would. That's when I started getting suspicious and feeling more and more anxious. I remember when I found the term sexual addiction, I thought, well, that fits. I brought it to my husband and he said, "Well, no, I'm not addicted. I can stop whenever I want." That's pretty classic. But I actually believed him because why would he lie about that? I figured he would know if he was in an addiction, right? The part that I could see was the compulsivity and the continuation. I didn't see the preoccupation and the tolerance because he didn't talk about it. He didn't share that with me. He didn't even know that about himself. So how could he share that with me? But he was in preoccupation regularly and he was developing a tolerance. So that all was happening. But then here's where shame comes in. Who am I that I married someone with a sex addiction? There's shame around that, even if you didn't even know that they had a sex addiction long before they met you. That was Rhyll's story. That was my story. I thought, well, gosh, there must be something wrong with me that I picked this. Shame also looks like maybe I'm not attractive enough. Maybe I'm not sexually fulfilling enough. Why is he choosing somebody else? Whether that is affair, pornography, sex workers, etc. There are a lot of ways to sexually act out. It still is this feeling of you didn't choose me, so there must be something wrong with me. And part of this is a protective mechanism that says, well, if I make this about me, that it's my problem, then maybe I can do something about it. But the truth is, it is his problem. It is his addiction. Even knowing it's not about you, the feeling of that shame is so overwhelming. And I just want to validate that and acknowledge that. Shame also says you're alone in this. Nobody else feels this way. Nobody else has a husband who has a sex addiction. Nobody else struggles with hypervigilance and anxiety around his sex addiction. The truth is, there are a lot of people who struggle with sex addiction. Most families have somebody who struggles with a sex addiction. The context and the details and the specific acting out behaviors may be different, but Rhyll said, addiction is addiction. Trauma is trauma, and recovery is recovery. I remember feeling like I needed to manage my husband's addiction because it was affecting me so much. I really was trying to overfunction to get him to stop so that I would be okay. And I thought if the actual acting out stopped, then I should be okay. Even if I'm doing my own healing, I figured, well, I'll heal, he'll stop, and then we'll be okay. There's actually a lot more happening here. Rhyll talks about that she didn't know any of the behaviors. There was not a single piece of evidence that she saw. But now, looking back, she can see all the resultant behaviors of addiction. And she lists them as defensiveness, emotional disconnect, blame, secrecy, dishonesty, control. I'm going to add justification, minimization, gaslighting, blame shifting, and objectification, and a lack of empathy. Those are actually the behaviors that are doing the damage. And yes, that acting out sexually, whatever that is painful and destructive. And these behaviors are equally so. And they get minimized. They get disregarded regularly. Now looking back, I see all of those behaviors and I'm like, oh yeah, there they are. Addiction hides in plain sight. I was so distracted by trying to find the acting out behaviors that I didn't look at the behaviors that I could see, that I had dismissed as regular marriage problems or his personality, or I just need to get over that. When I finally saw these behaviors and could place the boundaries around them, that's when I could get safe. It wasn't safe for me, even if he had stopped his sexual acting out, it wasn't safe for me because all of those same behaviors were still happening. That's the lack of safety. That's what I'm looking at. That's what I can see. That's what I can sense. The details of the acting out are irrelevant. If I'm seeing these behaviors, I'm not safe, period. That's where it can get really, really confusing because it seems like I just need to focus on those sexually acting out behaviors. And this is really classic. Well, he's in recovery and he says he's been sober for a year, let's say, but these behaviors are still happening and he may be sober. But when these behaviors are still present, that is still betrayal trauma. That is still the trauma. That is still the unsafety. For me, when I put the boundaries around those behaviors, and I realized I wasn't safe when these behaviors were happening, when the energy was there. It wasn't about words. It wasn't even about the checklist, but I'm going to meetings, I'm going to therapy. Sure, that's some context, but it was these behaviors and more importantly, my gut feeling, the energy that I sensed. That is what I started to trust. All right, how do we dispel shame? Dr. Jill Manning, a therapist who specializes in betrayal trauma, and Rhyll quotes her in the book, talks about 3 things that can help dispel shame: connection, advocacy, and validation. Connection is so critical because we've been in isolation for so long and we don't even know what real safe connection feels like. So finding that connection in support groups, safe friends, family, in 12-step groups like a SAIL 12-step, in our higher power, finding that connection. It's so important because without that connection, that shame, that isolation, and the loneliness, it just stays right all in here. For me, again, I was isolated for about 20 years. I didn't talk about it. I didn't find people about it. I really thought I could just figure this out on my own. And when I found safe support, oh man, it changed everything because now I could see what real safety and what real connection looked like. It became a really big contrast to what I had been experiencing in my marriage, which I hadn't experienced safety there. Really, I had gotten so used to it that I didn't even know, without experiencing a safe connection, I didn't even know that it wasn't safe. That was a really helpful part for me in recognizing what safety was. The next one is advocacy. This is finding a therapist or clergy or somebody who knows what's happening, who understands betrayal trauma and sexual addiction and advocates for you, supports you, and offers those resources and offers that advocacy that yes, you matter. Rhyll has in this advocacy section a great line that I'm going to read. Sexual addicts have a difficult time respecting women because an addict's behavior leads them to use and objectify women regularly. I have also learned that individuals who are sexually addicted do not have the capacity to feel empathy for another's pain. She continues, so in order to feel safe, I needed an advocate, someone who could understand and validate my pain because I was not feeling safe in my marriage. First of all, the line about objectifying and the lack of empathy, that really resonated with me. I really thought that I was responsible to teach my husband how to be empathetic. I was the one who needed that. So I was trying to make him change so that he could offer the validation and empathy so that we could connect and have intimacy and closeness. His lack of capacity was actually just evidence of the lack of safety. And I just thought if I hustled hard enough and told him how to do it more, that then he'd get it. But it wasn't my job. And that's where that advocacy comes in. So really, this is about, does he get the support he needs to be held accountable? Does he want to be accountable and find empathy and not just the script, but real empathy? I believe the lack of capacity for empathy is directly related to his lack of empathy for himself. And that is for him to figure out. Finally, when I stopped taking the responsibility to teach my husband how to be empathetic, he could take responsibility for finding the resources and support to learn and grow and find the empathy for himself, and then to be able to see me as a person and offer empathy. And that did not come in the form of a script. That came in the form of deep trauma healing that he took on himself. I have a degree in social work and a license. I was never going to be the one to teach him. That wasn't my role. I'm a partner. I'm a spouse. I'm not his therapist. So if he wants that growth, it's for him to find that. And then when he started showing up in empathy and having that capacity, then it was safe for me. When it wasn't safe, I simply wasn't going to engage with him with his lack of capacity of empathy. And some may say that he was traumatized and there's a reason for his lack of empathy and it's so hard for him. And that's true. That's context. It doesn't negate the fact that the lack of empathy is directly related to the level of our relationship connection capacity. It simply does not work for me to be with somebody who cannot show empathy. And believe me, I spent 20 years convincing him that it's a good idea to be empathetic. That was just me spinning my wheels, using up a lot of energy that ultimately didn't result in anything because he didn't feel like he actually needed to find that empathy for himself and others until he did. But that wasn't my doing. And if he never found that, that's for him to decide, and I wouldn't be able to be close with him. So she talks about that therapist, the authority, really finding someone who is trained. This will be the plug for the advocacy, finding someone who is trained, CSAT, ABSAT, betrayal trauma specialist. I have extensive training in betrayal trauma as well as ABSATs, as well as my own personal experience. It's important to find an advocate that understands the impact of betrayal trauma. Okay, last one, validation. This was so important for me. I had been in such a place that was invalidating with my husband. I came to my coaching with feelings and thoughts and ideas about what was happening with my husband. I'm trying to put the puzzle pieces together. I actually found myself in my body scared that she would show up with invalidation. Like, oh, no, it's fine. You're overreacting. I'm sure he didn't mean it. I'm sure that's not what it is. And I was surprised when she showed up with pure validation. Yeah, you're feeling like that. That makes sense. Yeah, you're scared. Yeah, that's a lot of anxiety because you are worried about what's going to happen because you've been lied to. Yeah, you've been traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized. That validation was so important to growing my own self-trust, because when I was in a place with such a lack of validation, what happened was I just kind of pushed my feelings down to hide them because, I'm being invalidated constantly. I probably am not seeing this right. I probably don't really know what's happening or feel what I'm feeling. Rhyll had the same experience. She said, well, my therapist said, well, yeah, you have been incredibly traumatized. And it shifted for her. She's like, oh, yeah, I have. She'd been burying her feelings for so long, she didn't even recognize them anymore. And that validation gave it room to come back and explore it. And it is rough when all those feelings start coming back. So that's why it's really important to get that support, because once you start getting a little validation, those feelings start trying to come up to the surface, and it's really important to have a safe space with that validation and empathy. Again, we're not diving into that trauma soup. We're just taking a little bit at a time to feel the feelings and to process them and to experience them. The other thing that therapist said, she was worried, how will I know if he's telling the truth, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, you'll know. That was a turning point for her to really slow down, to trust her gut, take her time, work on her own healing, get to the proximity and frequency at which she could observe her husband and watch and see what it felt like energetically, and trusting her gut the whole time. That's what validation offers, is a safe place to explore your own self-trust. The hard thing about being invalidated all the time is it actually runs a program without the person who had been invalidating or gaslighting you. They don't have to say anything anymore. I had run the program so much in my head that my husband didn't need to invalidate me anymore, because as soon as a thought or a feeling or a gut reaction would come up, I'd immediately push it down and say, oh, I'm overreacting. No, it's not happening. No, it's whatever it was. Secondly, society actually invalidates regularly. I don't know if I coined this phrase, but this is what I call it: polite invalidation, which looks like, yeah, I'm having a hard day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this done. Oh, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. I'm sure you're going to get it done. That's literally invalidation. Like, what if we just believe people with what they say? But we're so uncomfortable with any negative emotions that we got to push it down for somebody else. What if instead it looked like, oh man, that sounds really hard. Yeah, sounds like you're really struggling. Tell me more about that. There it is. That immediately, I don't know about you, but that felt really good in my body. If I hear that or if I say that, yeah, you know. So what if we become validators of ourselves, validators of others, and we find people who are willing to offer that validation and empathy so that we can experience that safe connection. We need connection. We need safe connection. Well, thank you for spending some time with me and Rhyll's book. I hope you pick it up and take a look at it. It's got some really great stuff. I'll dive into a little bit more next episode. I'm always really grateful to be able to share my thoughts, my experience. I really respect all these authors that I have a chance to explore. As always, take what resonates and leave the rest. Whatever I say, whatever the books say, you become the expert on yourself. You're growing your own self-trust. That's what this is about. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me today on the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Bookshelf. If something from this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend or come connect with me online. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Rachel Strong Smith. And if you want to go deeper, sign up for my email newsletter, where I share grounded support, personal insights, and practical tools to help you reconnect with yourself. Remember, healing isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, and every step towards yourself matters. So until next time, take gentle care.